All right, all. So today we are going to talk about Friedrich Nietzsche, who is a German existential philosopher, and we're going to talk about his ideas for a couple of reasons. One, because they're super duper interesting, obviously, but two, because some of his theories really have gotten mishandled throughout history, and he's been associated with a lot of like hate and bigotry that actually he didn't really support at all. And so I just kind of want to clarify and demystify some of those ideas as we go through how he would approach the idea or the question, what makes life meaningful. So Nietzsche was a German existential philosopher, and he really talked about how the life that we live, we need to think of ourselves in summary kind of as works of art, okay? Our lives here on earth are works of art. And this is from The Birth of Tragedy, one of his very early works. He said, "We have our highest dignity in our significance as works of art, for it is only as an aesthetic phenomenon that existence and the world are entirely justified." Here he's really trying to reject the idea that our existence should be merely intellectual or physical or productive or academic or in the brain, in the mind, right? If we are not deeply feeling and moving through our experience in kind of a profound, aesthetic, creative, and beautiful way. And that doesn't mean that we all have to be artists, because you guys have seen my whiteboard art, so you know that that's not really my cup of tea. I'm not good at that. That's not what he's talking about. He doesn't mean that like you have to or don't have to be a creative person in any sort of traditional sense. What he means is a deeply profound and meaningful aesthetic existence, okay? A life in the body, okay? That is deep and resonant, okay? And it helps if we understand what the word aesthetic means. The word aesthetic comes from this Greek word that I'm not even going to pretend to know how to pronounce, but that means to perceive, to sense, and to feel. And Nietzsche really thought that like modern life and the demands of modern life could really push someone into a type of malaise, which is like a discontent, like it's like a sadness or a frustration, and you don't really know where it comes from. And he was really arguing that like if we continue to live a life that is all productivity and success and order and reason and rationalism, what we will do is we'll cut off our ability to perceive and to sense and to feel. And so by perceiving of ourselves and of our lives as like these works of art that we are to create, what we end up doing is we open up particular capacities in ourselves that would otherwise have been ignored or lain dormant, that we would have had to kind of put to the side in order to be successful. John Cagg is a PhD philosophy department chair at the University of Lowell in Massachusetts, and he wrote this really great hiking memoir called Hiking with Nietzsche. And he goes through Nietzsche's works and like where he lived and all of that. And these are some of his comments, a scholar's comments on aesthetic living. He said that only in perceiving the world differently, only in feeling deeply, could one overcome modern nihilism. Tragedy, according to Nietzsche, had its benefits. It proved that suffering could be more than suffering. In bitter rawness, pain could still be directed, well ordered, and even beautiful and sublime. So it's the idea that like Nietzsche really believed that like, listen, life is hard. Life can be painful. We will experience suffering. Bad stuff will happen. Sometimes good stuff will happen, but also like some bad stuff will happen. And what we really need to do is learn how to shape our worldview so that we can overcome this like sense that everything is meaningless, because we talked about that, right? That everything is absurd. We begin from the place that everything is absurd and that the universe is ultimately meaningless. And if that's the case, how do we keep that meaninglessness from overtaking us and sending us to deep, dark places? We have to view the world aesthetically. We have to view our lives as art. What are we creating? What are we making? How are we making our lives, our existence, our world more beautiful? Okay. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he introduces this idea of the Overman and the Ubermensch. And this is the idea that really kind of gets messed up throughout history, especially because of this phrase, the will to power, that's used in the text. And the will to power, and especially if we use the word Superman, I think that's a really poor translation, because we have the comic book character, right? And we think of like power, strength, and defeating evil, and and I have to be stronger than everybody, and my will to power means I'm more powerful than you, and I have to put you down in order to succeed. No. That's actually not at all what he was talking about. When he talks about the will to power over man, he's talking about us. He's talking about yourself. That you have to overcome your humanliness and become the Overman. You have to become the Ubermensch, because the Ubermensch is the exemplar of true humanity, true morality, and true virtue. The Overman overcomes himself in order to inhabit a significant creativity that can make the world, that fills the world with meaning and fullness. In an individual way, you are not going to save the entire world, but you can save the world for yourself in a way. You have been you have cast off the values that have been put upon you by your society, by your culture, your religion, your whatever, all the groups that you're a part of. You've liberated yourself from those values, and you've defined your own set of values on your own terms. And the qualities that really characterize the Ubermensch are originality, independence, and creativity, right? And so these ideas are all tied together. Okay, so the Ubermensch is not like the most powerful man, survival of the fittest, Darwinian. No. The Ubermensch is actually a man who is often if you will, who has overcome the limitations of his humanliness in order to see the world as something in which he can live aesthetically full of deep meaning and profound significance by existing in a way that is in accordance with the values and the virtues that he has created for himself. Does that kind of make sense? I know, that's a lot of threads. Deep, deep, deep. This is also from that Hiking with Nietzsche book, and I think it's just really lovely, and we're kind of ended up here, right? So what is the meaning of life, right? Well, what's the meaning of life for Nietzsche? To cross the bridge of self and become the Overman. This is life's goal. This is life's aim, is to overcome, via the will to power, overcome the self, the limitations, the weaknesses, to not live in what Sartre would call bad faith, right? And to live in a transcendent, kind of like a higher vibration, a different plane, right? The Buddha might call this awakening, if you will, right? Enlightenment. I don't know that Nietzsche would use that term, but we're kind of talking about parallel concepts here, right? And so, again, this is Kag. He says, Nietzsche's existential hero, the Overman, the Superman, Nietzsche's existential hero terrifies and inspires us in equal measure. The Ubermensch stands as a challenge to imagine ourselves otherwise, above the societal conventions and self-imposed constraints that quietly govern modern life, above the steady, unstoppable march of the everyday, above the anxiety and depression that accompany our daily pursuits, above the fear and self-doubt that keep our freedom in check. Okay, so my questions to you, as always, what do you think? Okay, what do you think about life as an aesthetic experience? What do you think about your life as a work of art? What do you think, could we all live that way? And if we did, what would the world look like? Okay, so give it a look, see, all right, and fill out that Google form so I can give you good attendance and have a record of your presence in my class. You guys are doing great, all right? I'll talk to you soon. Bye.